Jack. I'm not standing by to give you a test. I'm sitting by, or actually I'm commuting by. And I'm commuting because KTM's new 690 Duke is designed to do exactly this, and designed to do it so well that it's actually fun. Well, on a cold Highveld early morning, fun might be stretching it a bit. It's difficult to put a smile on your face when parts of your body are getting frostbite and it feels like every car driver is out to get you. But regular commuting bikers will know this daily battle between man and machine, though occasionally a little hectic, is surely worth the effort, because we can easily save hours of travelling time over the course of a week. And it has to be admitted that, thanks to the Duke, carving through traffic has never been easier. Tipping the scales at just 150 kilos without fuel, it's much lighter than any of its possible competitors. With only the one 690cc cylinder, you could be forgiven for assuming that this is a slow bike. But with very nearly 70 horsepower, this is the world's most powerful single. Braking only requires a single front disc, and the standard ABS can be switched off. Simple instruments, but with 3 engine maps for different riding conditions. Well, it creamed the city environment, did the Duke, and now we're out on some entertaining but bumpy little back roads, and it's completely at home. It really is good fun. So the Duke for 2012, massive improvement. Really is now a usable everyday bike. But the 690 motor, KTM probably think it's more important in the Enduro model. And since I obviously am hopeless off-road, I've got a professional standing by to tell me exactly what it's like. Say hello to Gary Franks from Enduro World.
Well, Matt, we all know that road riding is for sissies. The real stuff happens in the dirt. And KTM have a derivative of the 690, which is the 690R Enduro. And this is a bike you can do pretty much anything with.
Although it shares an engine and frame with the Duke, there are obviously some important modifications for its off-road role. More minimalist, crash-resistant bodywork, a narrower seat, and a more simple lighting system that helps keep the Enduro R fully road legal, which will come in very handy if you fancy using your weekend toy for a spot of commuting.
I think the bike's been so popular that this year they've just had to make a few refinements to it. I think making the seat a little lower was probably a good call. Refining the power delivery by longer stroke and new engine mapping. Also the brake discs I think are new.
They're also smaller and more ventilated than the Dukes.
The bike really handles very well for a bike of its size.
It's big for an enduro bike, but small as a road bike.
I think the bike would appeal to quite a wide diversity of people. It's called an enduro bike, but what they mean by that, I think, is that you can ride to the track and go out on a nice outride. I wouldn't want to do anything overly technical with it, so it's not an extreme enduro bike by any means.
Well, for someone who thinks a dusty garage floor is a serious off-road obstacle, this looks pretty extreme. But it's not. This is the sort of terrain that the Enduro R eats up without even breaking a sweat. The major advantage for the 690 when covering unknown ground is the ever-available grunt. No need to constantly hammer away at the gearbox when the engine is so responsive, anywhere between 3 and 8,000 RPM. With shorter gearing and 8 kilos less weight to deal with, the Enduro's acceleration feels even more lively than the Duke's. It loses a bit of top speed in the process, but 200 k's an hour really isn't that much use out here. With double the suspension travel of the Duke, it does a great job of soaking up the bumps, but still has enough in hand to deal with the occasional heavy landing. Darryl Curtis offering moral support and an opinion on the 690.
I really enjoy the technical stuff, and I couldn't find a better bike. It's got a nice range. I mean, I can get at least 180 kilometers on this tank.
Ooh, that looks scary. And maybe it felt that way too because Darryl has abandoned the 690 in favour of his Dakar 450. How difficult must reading that road map be? I can't even do that while driving a car.
It's a 2012 KTM 450 Rally replica. There's only 60 of them made in the world. The 450 engine we used is specially prepared by the factory. And going into Dakar, we know we've got a lifespan on the engine of 4,500 kilometers, where we change the engine halfway at the rest day. The cost of a new engine is 90,000 Rand. And when we have to rebuild them, a piston alone is 18,000 Rand. So there really are some expensive bits in there, and it's not something that you want to break. The bike carries 35 litres of fuel. It's got 18 litres in the rear tank and 8.5 litres in each of these two front tanks over here. The bike is superbly engineered. It's well balanced. You know, we can run either off the front tanks or the rear tanks to distribute the weight evenly. But most of the time I run it on a dual switch, and both of the tanks empty at the same time. We're carrying quite a lot of liquid on this bike. There's another 5 litres of compulsory water at the bottom, which fits in the bash plate. If you get into trouble in the middle of nowhere, like at Atacama Desert, and your camelback is finished and you've got a problem with your bike, at least you know you've got to reserve 5 litres of drinking fluid there. Just 2 bolts in the front and the whole bash plate drops out, and you can access that water. The suspension is a standard suspension. If you beefed it up a little bit, obviously for all the extra weight. It's white power. And I must say I'm completely happy with it. I won't have to make any modifications. One of the things that make this bike feel really big is all the fairing in front with all the headgear. It's very necessary. I've got a couple of bits missing here because you know, the GPS, for example, you cannot buy, you only rent it for Dakar. So we've got a Unique 2 GPS that fits in over here. And you've got your road book, which you scroll from a little switch down at the bottom over here. I've got a speedo cap up top here, which repeats the cap over ground, which is your compass reading from the GPS. And then I've got 2 ICOs over here, which is basically a trip meter, which I've got to keep aligned to the road book at any time. It's very easy to work on the motorcycle. Just a couple of clips on the front and the whole front fairing comes off. 3 bolts will get the right tank off, 3 bolts for the left tank. And the whole rear of the bike, the rear tank makes up the frame. In the front, the Sentinel normally fits in over here. And then over here we've got all our emergency equipment, flares, all that kind of thing. And up top you can see the antennas for the GPS's, AirTrack. And your oil cooler fits in here just below the headlight cluster. If I need to get down to the airbox, it's very easy to just take the seat off. And the fuse box sits right on top here, it's very handy, as well as the battery and your airbox, very easy to get to.
Darryl Curtis and the 450 Dakar bike represent KTM at its very best. But lots of that race DNA runs through both the Duke and the Enduro R.